Tactical RPGs have been a thing going all the way back to the early days of gaming, with the East and West both putting their stamp on this genre. Japan had stuff like Dragon and the Princess and Bukusuka Wars, while the West had games like Tunnels of Doom and Ultima 3. All these games were more inspired by D&D and similar tabletop games than the later entries in this genre though, because for the most part all of this early stuff felt more like a party of heroes delving through dungeons than a grand fantasy mass battle. Apart from Bukusuka Wars, which kinda has that feel of a grand battle taking place but in a somewhat primitive form. And I actually have this game for my Famicom and I can confirm that it's very ahead of its time, but bloody awful.
This game sucks!
Although there was a lot of games that had this style of combat coming from the West, the real development of this genre came from Weeaboo Wonderland. And a big stepping stone in this early development was the start of the Fire Emblem series of games that just took all this early stuff and turned it up to 11. The battles managed to feel massive even with the limited hardware of the Famicom at the time, and all the character art and story helped make it feel like a grand adventure, and the battles were just so addictive and fun. The leveling system in particular in the Fire Emblem games just grabbed me for some reason. And you know, it has waifus as well.
Guru Gaga, why aren't you breastfeeding if I'm such a baby?
And I actually got into the genre because Marth and Roy from Fire Emblem were included in Smash Bros. Melee, which is a story for another time perhaps. But you might be seeing a bit of a trend here because for most of this genre's history, the most innovation came from Japan. Sure, there was outliers like XCOM, but about 80% of these games were not made in the West and mostly in the East. And one of the West's attempts at this style of game is what I'm going to be talking about today, Gladius, which takes a lot of the elements from all these types of games and does its own spin on it, which results in a really unique game. Instead of mass battles, it sort of takes the legends of Roman Colosseums and gladiators and turns it into a tactical RPG adventure, which kind of makes it feel like a sports rag to riches tale with the character wanting to become the best gladiator around. It might be a story as old as time, but I can never quite get over a good hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell might have put it. And Gladius was actually the first ever game I covered on my old YouTube channel, and that video was quite frankly awful. So this video is kinda me going back and redeeming myself because this game is amazing and it really deserves a better video made about it. Because it seems like no one else remembers this or is talking about this strange game but myself and a couple of other miscreants. But anyway, enough stalling.
Let's get right into the news.
Gladius starts with an opening cutscene that explains the backstory of the world we're about to be adventuring around like a hobbit in Middle-earth. Basically, back in the old times, there was a great war between Nordag and Imperia, which is basically this game's stand-ins for Vikings and Romans. Much like in our real world, the emperor of the Roman faction was a giant bellend and wanted to take over the world. And the only people to resist the giant Johnny was of course the Nords and their barbarian king. The violence overtaking the lands then caused the Dark God to arise, destroying the armies of both factions. Then the Valkyries joined the fight to help the humans, and the gods lent the Queen of the Valkyries their strength so she could defeat the Dark God. But this came at a great cost, and all the Valkyries died, stopping the Dark God from taking over the world of man. And the survivors of this battle vowed to never let this happen again, and this made the Imperial Emperor realise war bad, and he got away with all of his war crimes. Just like in the real world.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Now watch this drive.
Nice shot!
And this led to the resurgence of the gladiator games, so people can just tribally hate each other over sports just like in the real world as well. And that's the setup for this game, and from watching that video, surely people wouldn't be so dumb as to let the Dark God rise again, right?
Of course not, don't be ridiculous.
When you start a new file of Gladius, you get the option between starting with Valens in Imperia or Ursula in Nordag. It's kinda cool that you get the option between these two different paths, and it kinda reminds me of Dragon Age Origins with its different intros. But sadly, the beginning doesn't really change the story all that much, but it's a nice little addition. With Ursula, you get her backstory that she was a child of prophecy that is the envoy of the return of the Dark God. I'm sure there's nothing to that prophecy whatsoever, they're all just mad people. She was born as a twin with a boy called Erlen. So her father, who happens to be the king of Nordag, keeps her a secret so some witch cult doesn't come after her. And this leads to her having a secluded Disney princess life where she of course wants to break free and see a whole new world. And she gets the chance she's looking for when her brother Erlen is going to take his father's school to compete in the gladiator games. Because he's in charge of the school now and he can choose to take her, but he's having none of it, so they do a bet that if Ursula can take him in a duel, she'll go with him. And she absolutely ruffle stomps him.
I am a nurse.
A nurse?
Yes.
Beta!
So she's now Mulan'd her way into going to the gladiator games, and their journey begins with the help of their father's old friend Eustace. And no matter who you pick, you'll have Eustace shepherding you around the games of these lands. With Valens, you are trying to rebuild his father's gladiator school that has fallen into disarray ever since the death of his father. And he will be doing this with the help of his childhood friend Ludo and the very same Eustace from Ursula's story. After you complete the first area, you basically take on the people you didn't pick in the second area, so it doesn't make much of a difference. As a kid, I of course picked Valens because I wasn't going to play as a girl, because girls have cooties and they make me feel funny. So this time for the video I played for as Ursula, and she's basically the main character anyway, so it kind of makes more sense. Plus Valens absolutely sucks anyway, and we don't need him and his daddy issues raining on our parade. But after we finish up all the tutorial nonsense, we are finally shown what we are going to be doing in this game. And the main thrust of this game is going around the various countries of this world, beating all the different gladiator games each zone has to offer before moving on. It kinda has the feel of something like Pokemon in a way, with all these different challenges being like the gyms you would get in those games. It has a semi-open world feel to it like those games too, with you being able to tackle various games in whatever order you want. Sure, the game is just sort of your bog standard, ye old time setting with your usual Rome, Nord, Egyptian and Mongolian steppe settings, but I really like the world this game lays out. That's probably more to do with me being a sucker for these kinds of settings rather than it actually being good though. I think for the most part it just reminds me of one of my favourite games from the same time, Age of Mythology. And the fact that this is a fantasy setting with monsters that you can recruit is always going to be a plus for me. The actual battles themselves work pretty much the same as any other tactical RPG, with your units and your opponent's units taking turns whacking each other. When it's your turn, you can move, attack and use different skills that you gather as you play through and level up all your different characters. The one thing that Gladius does a little bit different to the other games in this genre is that when you go to attack, you actually have to do a minigame to enhance the attack. Some of these work kinda like how you do your swing in a golf game, with you having to hit the buttons at the right time to get a crit. But there's also ones where you have to hit combinations of buttons as quickly as you can to get a good hit. But when you get more complicated moves, the button inputs get a bit more crazy and hard to pull off, like multiple meters with combo attacks. But for the most part, I kinda just got good at these few types of meters and stuck with them. When it comes to the button tapping really fast ones, I can never get the hang of them because I'm obviously a lily-livered sissy boy.
You're a pussy.
You can also get the advantage on your opponents by attacking them roughly from behind. But also, if you get the height advantage on your opponent, you can get a massive buff to the damage you'll be dealing. But there's also weight classes that you have to take into account when you're attacking stuff, kinda like the weapon triangle in Fire Emblem. There's light, medium and heavy, with a couple extra classes that sort of get arbitrarily chucked into different categories. Light beats heavy, medium beats light and heavy beats medium, but it's not quite as extreme as it is in Fire Emblem. So you're not going to get into situations like in Fire Emblem where a bow is just going to one-shot your Pegasus Knight. To be fair, throughout most of the game I just disregarded the classes and still managed to get through the game anyway. But I did tend to gravitate towards the heavy classes quite a lot because they were just complete beast mode. I got this one big lady who I used to completely cuck everyone with.
I want to make babies with her. Think of them. Great big monsters.
And talking of complete beast mode, all the ranged units in this game are absolutely overpowered. As a kid I strayed away from using these because I thought anything that wasn't hand to hand was for great big Jessies. And it's probably why I found this game so hard as a kid, because if I'd used a set of gun gears like I did now, I would have breezed through. In the early game they almost break the game in many ways because you can just sit at the back and deal out insane amounts of damage. But another class that's similar and overpowered is the undead summoners and non-dead ones, which can summon people to fight for them and also sit at the back protected by hordes of skeletons. But I think the strength of the classes in this game is that they all feel unique and you get different stuff out of them. A lot of the monster classes in this game are completely unlike any of the other units in the game, like the Mongrels and the Satyrs. The Mongol Shaman has a good mix of speed and magic, while the Satyr has the unique ability of drunkenly dancing to entertain the crowd and hitting people with tankards of alcohol.
Was this story based? Yes.
I ended up getting really attached to my party of warriors that I gathered throughout my adventures. Especially my bear Burry, he was the best tanker Goblin could ask for right up until the end of the game. It's part of what makes going into a new area so exciting because you want to see the new units you can recruit. Most of the battles in Gladius do just boil down to kill all the enemies before they kill you, but there's a few different match types. You get stuff like King of the Hill where you have to own certain spots longer than your opponent, barrel breaking contests that are pretty much self-explanatory, ones where you have to destroy your opponent's monument before they can destroy yours, or battles where whoever deals the most damage will win. But there's also battles that can occur outside the safety of the towns, and in these random battles your non-story dependent characters can actually die. A lot of this stuff is pretty basic, but it spices up the battles a little bit, and a lot of the different arenas will have different requirements for battles, which also ensures you have to try and keep your party varied so you have enough stuff to cover the weird challenges. In every city you'll have to win a certain amount of cups before taking on that town's main challenge that will give you a badge for that area. When you've beaten everything in the region, you can go take on the final battle of that area and then move on, and this is what you have to do in every area of the game. Winning the battles is how you gain XP and money to spend on equipment for your party, and you use the money to recruit units at towns as well. At a certain point the money you can get from selling stuff becomes absolutely mental and it makes the money kinda pointless. But I'm okay with that because it lets me live out my dream of being part of the 1%.
Hello, I
I like money.
I definitely found this game a lot easier than I did when I was a kid, but there's still some challenge to be found in some battles. But for the most part, with the help of level grinding, Gladius is a pretty easy time and you can easily trick the AI. Like the battles where there's multiple teams in one melee, and because the computer just attacks whoever's closest to it, you can just sit at the back and let them fight like knife fighting monkeys. However, it's still a lot of fun because even though the battles are basic, they're just really entertaining. And the loop of leveling up and acquiring more gear and loot just really kept me coming back to this game. Another really neat feature that this game has over other tactical RPGs is the fact that there's an option for multiplayer with you and some friends taking control of different characters. Sure, you could achieve the same thing by just passing a control around, but it's cool that they included this option. I actually spent most of my time playing this game in multiplayer with one of my school friends as a kid, and it was awesome. And it's a good thing that the gameplay and party building is good because my lord, the story is the most slapped together thing about this game. I mean, I'll cut this game some slack because it's as old as Father Time, but at points it really does come off like something like The Room. I mean, this scene where Erlen is having a secret conversation about Ursula in obvious earshot of Ursula did get me a bit.
Erlan, I wish to speak to you alone.
12 seconds later.
So, take her to Imperia at the mercy of Imperial blades, or leave her here under the threat from the Galdar.
What do the witches want from her?
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
I'm not necessarily saying the story and voice acting being a bit wafty is a bad thing though, because it's honestly entertaining in a so bad it's good way. It kinda just adds to this game's charm a bit more and made me love it even more, to be honest with you. Especially with the obvious and forced romance between Ursula and Valens at times that really made my skin crawl.
Well, I'm part of a school from Nordog. I would be happy to have you on my team.
From Nordog? I've never heard someone from there speak so sweetly. It's very charming.
Well, thank you.
Get out! My eyes are bleached! Get that away from me!
And there are some parts of this game that just scream early 2000s, like a teenage me in baggy jeans and a Linkin Park t-shirt. For example, when you go into the third area of the game, the main characters all get an outfit change, I guess, because they're going somewhere hotter. And Ursula is just suddenly in the skimpiest outfit I've seen in a long time. At least it's equal opportunity, because Valens is sex-potting it up as well. But for some reason, Erlen is still in his normal clothes, which for some reason has less defense than Ursula, who's walking around in a bra and panties. Makes perfect sense. Again though, these things are just of their time and place, and it brings me back to a bygone era where every video game character was dressed like a Playboy girl. My favourite thing though has got to be Eustace's voice actor. My man sounds like Churchill giving a speech after an all-night bender.
I'll be led into an ignominious.
Of course the story is nonsense, but it keeps the game plodding along, and I really like how it deals with the end portion of the game. It really made me clench my butt cheeks. I feel like spoiling the story to this game is no big deal because you can know how it ends and still enjoy the game. But I'm gonna spoil it, so you have been warned. So basically, the moment you beat all the areas and win the World Cup of Gladiators, a giant colossus comes to life and attacks the stadium. It wreaks havoc on the stadium and even kills the Emperor of Imperia himself. And I kept just thinking, we're gonna get to fight this thing, that's gonna be awesome. Only for the game to cut away to our valiant heroes heroically retreating from the stadium with their tails between their legs. They obviously just all sprained their ankles in the last battle. And this strategic retreat leads to some bad guy antagonist who's been popping in to be racist to Ursula and her brother throughout the course of the game to get all the glory.
Ah, the little school from Nordog. Did you not learn your lessons before? Go back to your forest shacks. Imperia's for real warriors.
Don't be racist. I am a building.
And with the help of a scantily clad sorcerer woman who looks like she just stepped off the set of The Mummy, Mutus now takes over Imperia. And his racism towards Nordag leads him to raise an army of undead legionnaires to take out the country once and for all. And this leads to the endgame of Gladius, which I think is one of the best parts of the game. You get all these story-led set-piece battles to work through. But the thing that makes this whole section for me is the fact that if any of your units die, they're dead for good, like every other outdoor battle in the game. This makes all of the battles here at the end incredibly tense because you don't want to lose any units you've come to love over the course of your journey. It's a genius bit of game design that made every battle at the end here pure brown trousers time. The only bit that kind of sucks is that if any characters that are important to the story die, it doesn't matter. I would have preferred that if that happened, you'd have to go back and do all the battles again or something to make it more challenging. And I'm sad to announce that I actually did lose a couple of my favourite units during these end fights. One of my gun gears sadly passed away in the last battle, and the most devastating of all, my beloved big lady sadly was taken out.
Oh, no, no.
But thankfully no harm became of my beautiful polar bear Burry, and that's all that matters because he is the best boy. This whole section of the game is just full of these fights with big monsters that kind of changes the feel of the game for a bit. It starts to feel more like a JRPG or something, with these being the boss rush fights at the end. And the fact that at any moment your units could die makes this ending of the game feel very epic and impactful. It really elevates this game in my opinion because I never beat this game as a kid, but coming back to it now I have an even greater love for it. But basically in this section Ursula finds out she's Jesus and gets magical Lady Boob armor to slay the Dark God with, which concludes with a battle with the Dark God himself, which really reminds me of the final fight from Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones actually. It's a classic multi-stage boss battle as well, which just layers on the feeling of this being a JRPG end battle. While it's not the hardest, it's still entertaining and you have the threat of units dying looming over you the whole time. Then Ursula gives us the classic I have to go because my people need me in heaven meme. She joins the halls of Valhalla or something, then we get a little outro stab hinting at a sequel with the booby sorcerer lady and Ludo. The end. Man, I wish we got a sequel to this game. They could have expanded on everything from this game and just made an absolute gem. I know we're never going to get a sequel now, but I would really love to see an indie studio take up the premise of this game and make something new with it. Now in conclusion, Gladius certainly does have its problems, but my god is it a fun game and at times a silly game that just keeps me smiling ear to ear the whole time I'm playing it. It's definitely the hidden gem of the Lucasarts game catalogue and one more people need to give a go. I would 100% recommend it if you're like me and you're a fan of tactical RPGs and the mystical setting like I am. But I'm sure a lot of you who clicked on this video did so because you already played this game growing up too. So I would like to hear about your experiences with this game in the comments down below. Anyway, I've been a Goblin and thank you for watching. If you would like to get all my videos early and to get your name in the credits, consider supporting me on Patreon like all these awesome people have. Links in the description.